I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hey, y'all. Before we get into this episode, we do have exciting news. Our podcast has been nominated as Best Local Podcast here in Savannah by Connect Savannah. Every year, they have their Best of competition. It's a very acclaimed competition here in Savannah. And so it's a really big honor to be nominated for it. We really do need your help voting, though. You can vote every single day, and we have a link in our description for it. So it is under Best Local Podcast for the most haunted city on earth. But while you are there, we are nominated for some other various ventures. So Savannah Underground is nominated for Best Local Theater Production, and Chris's improv troupe, Odd Lot, is nominated for Best Local Comedy Troupe, and then JT was nominated for Best Local Theater Director, and that is under John Taylor Timmons, if you didn't know his full name by now. So, but we do really appreciate you guys voting, and it is a big deal if you win this competition. So let's be the first ghost podcast to win that category.
Come on.
Rolling. We kind of sound like those seagulls from Finding Nemo. The mine. Rolling.
Y'all just like doing fun things into the microphone.
You really should be utilizing this information that we give.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because I was saying mine over and over again.
Mine.
Okay.
We'll make T-shirts out of it.
Right.
All right. Here we go.
It's just ghosts instead of the seagulls.
Go for it.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Most Haunted City on Earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And today we are going to be talking about everybody's favorite topic, doppelgangers.
Doppelgängers.
The internet just goes wild over doppelgangers.
Yeah, we decided to do this episode when we had two TikToks do stupendously well. And I think they're the only two TikToks we've ever done on doppelgangers. So, I feel like
we mentioned doppelgangers and boom.
Yes.
So it's an experiment, really, is what we're doing. Yeah. We're conducting a little experiment.
It is.
How much do you love doppelgangers?
If I see the views, because I religiously check the analytics like multiple times a day. And so if I see like the views just skyrocket, we're starting a doppelganger show. Absolutely. We're going to have Doppelganger December.
Doppelganger December.
I love it.
Jordan Peele would be very proud of us.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, though, if you are watching this on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe. It definitely helps us out a lot. Do all the comments, the sharing, all those jazzy things.
Yeah, right, the stuff that makes the things go.
Yes, exactly.
YouTube sees you hit the like button, and then it goes, oh, they like it. More people will like it.
Oh, yeah.
Those tricky algorithms.
Nice.
But if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all those things, definitely consider giving us a rating. A 5-star rating. Definitely help us out as well. So,
and you can just like it, in your heart.
Yeah.
No.
If you
Analytics.
If you feel compelled.
Algorithm.
Must feed the algorithm.
But now that we've done all that business, we can go ahead and start talking about doppelgangers. So we've sent the internet on a quest to find mirror lore. And that TikTok got 2.2 million views, and nobody has been able to find the book.
And what's fascinating is, when you think about old books, finding old books is a bit of a treasure hunt. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, this might have been a small press book.
Right.
It was in the library on the base in Vicenza, Italy.
Yeah.
And Lord only knows where it could have been a one-off from some weird magazine that's like, yeah, let's just print out these books. Because I kept, for a long time, I thought it was a Time Life book. Time Life did a series on supernatural books. And I was certain that it was a Time Life, in the Shadows book or something like that. It is not. It is not one of the Time Life books because it was that same thin,
Right.
You know,
like periodical. Of
almost
sorts.
like it was a part of a set, maybe. But I never saw any of the other parts of the set, which is, of course, why I thought it was a Time Life book.
See.
So, so even more so, it might be a part of a set. It might not be like an individual standalone book.
So if you live on that military base or know somebody who works on that military base,
go to that library, which I'm sure is still there.
Right. Well, you know,
I can't promise you anything. I once went to my childhood base in Germany. It is gone. That entire base and all the buildings are gone. Like the building I lived in is gone.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it could still be there.
It could still be there.
And knowing government entities, they aren't going to rotate these books out. So it is very possible that that book is still sitting on a shelf somewhere at that military base, if it's still there.
And so for people just like chiming in, what is the book?
Oh, so the book is called Mirror Lore. And I want to say it had like a subtitle of The Folklore About Mirrors. And it talked about all the different things that people do with mirrors, covering them during funerals and stuff like that. And each chapter was dedicated to a curious practice around mirrors. People used to think that they could divine the future from mirrors. I think they were saying that the Oracle at Delphi was actually a mirror. And mirrors at that time, I think, were like silver bowls that they filled with water. And then and then they would look into the water,
like Harry Potter.
I guess,
yeah.
I mean, and again, this book did that, but at the end, the last chapter was on doppelgangers, and it kind of detailed that Bloody Mary was a doppelganger story.
Oh,
and the one thing that always stuck out from that book was that doppelgangers watch us from mirrors. That's how they get close to us. Is if you're looking in the mirror, the reflection might not be a reflection. It might be your doppelganger stalking you.
I have to know what this book is.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna cut this whole snippet into a TikTok, including what I'm talking about right now, and we're just gonna put in big letters. Can you find this book?
Right.
And we're gonna have not just a small group. We're gonna have all of TikTok finding this book. We're gonna find this book.
People have been commenting because I put that in the caption. I was like, find Mirror Lore. And people are commenting back like days after they watched the TikTok, like, did anybody find the book? You know?
Anybody find the book? Find this book. Yeah, it's very strange. I'm beginning to worry that it's like a Mandela effect situation.
Oh, no.
Because I've never, ever seen it again. I've never seen any reference to it. I've never seen anything like it. But again, it would be like trying to find a weird children's book that you found when you were a kid, because it was kind of like a children's book in my mind. Big print, big pictures, lots of pictures.
Lots of pictures.
All right, so Chris, close your eyes.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking.
And reflect.
No pun intended.
Here I am.
Are there any details that you can give TikTok about this book?
I've get all of it.
Everything you've already said.
It looked like a Time Life book. And if you're familiar, because I think Time Life did a Wild West series, and they did a supernatural series. And I was so certain that it was one of those supernatural books, but it wasn't. I've been through every one of the Time Life books. It's not there. The cover was a picture, an optical illusion of a woman looking into a mirror, and she's like combing her hair. She had black hair, and the whole picture looks like a skull, but if you look at it closer, it's obviously a woman looking into a mirror.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a famous
optical
illusion.
Oh, cool.
So
that
should give you reference.
That should help.
Yeah.
And I don't even think in my youth I never looked who wrote this. I would like to see who wrote this. Who was the publisher? What was the publishing date? I never even looked at any of those things when I was a kid.
No, kids don't.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me.
It'd be like a Prodigy.
Like fun, spooky book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Chris, what is something that you know about doppelgangers that you haven't yet shared on this podcast?
It's German for double goer.
Ooh. Okay.
That's the actual doppelganger is German for double goer. And in tradition, a doppelganger is a spirit that looks like you. that can look like you, and it has actually grown into a kind of a phenomena where the belief is that there are living people on the planet who look like you, who just happen to live their lives looking a lot like you, related people who look a lot like you. And in German lore, to see your doppelganger is a harbinger of your own death. So it's very similar to the banshee in that regard. There's a lot of ghosts that when they appear, it kind of signifies that you are going to die. So it's a bad thing to see your doppelganger.
Yeah. Wow.
But and it pervades. It's a part of so many literary devices. There's a lot of shows, movies that have worked on the principle of someone trying to take your life, and that becomes the driving force of a doppelganger. The doppelganger is replicating who you are. They have all your memories. They have all of your, they have the intent to become you, to live out your life. And so one of the things that I always found interesting was, and people don't really talk about this all that often, is that the doppelganger's goal is to kill you and take over your life. And that is why some people say there's marked changes in people overnight. All of a sudden this charitable person's very stingy, and all of a sudden this mean person is very kind. They're thinking that, it's the doppelganger. The doppelganger got to him and now is living out his life.
Kind of like a weird, twisted form of reincarnation?
Basically.
Kinda.
Yeah, kind of.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's honestly, if y'all remember that thought or theory that Avril Lavigne was, like something happened to Avril Lavigne where like her doppelganger came through.
Interesting.
Yeah, because they were basically saying like there was like this whole conspiracy theory where she like looked slightly different and she went away for a long period of time and then she came back and her voice sounded a little bit different and things like that, and I'm like, that could just be maturity, but well,
and we're fascinated by the concept. We're fascinated, for the longest time, the Paul McCartney.
Oh yeah,
Billy Shears, the idea that Paul McCartney died in a car wreck and they replaced him with somebody who looked like him, and it was that whole endless fascination in the idea that you could replace somebody.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could. I mean, the people have been blaming the government, like conspiracy theorists or just people really interested in conspiracy think that, the government has been switching people out, which is not necessarily like that's not, otherworldly thought. I mean, that's not like that thought couldn't.
No,
I mean,
and
manifest.
it's fascinating because there had been like if you go deep diving into those conspiracies, there's a belief that when you enter into like high level spy stuff, there might be a program, a facial recognition program, trying to find somebody that if they had to fake your death, they'd use that body.
That's
which is a great plot for a screenplay, by the way.
Yeah, I know, right?
Is the government finds somebody who looks like the person, and that even brings to like the literary devices of The Prince and the Pauper, which was this famous tale of a lowly person who just happened to look exactly like the prince, and they switched them during a time of upheaval just so that the prince could experience life as a commoner, and this pauper becomes the prince for a while. And even the Man in the Iron Mask, Alexander Dumas, wrote a story about the reason why the man is in the Iron Mask is because he is the twin of the actual king. Oh. And so they put the mask on his face so no one's like, oh, why is the king in the jail? So yeah, there's lots of stories like that. I even want to say Dostoevsky wrote, and I want to say it's probably just a straight up doppelganger story called The Double, in which a man encounters a man who looks just like him, and then of course it spells his ultimate doom because Dostoevsky was not a cheery writer. So yeah, the fact that the stories are constantly coming up and people are constantly telling them, and that's we were talking about Jordan Peele's Us. Yeah, is a play on the doppelganger's notion, because in the fullness of the doppelganger lore, everybody has a doppelganger. Every human being has this doppelganger, this spirit that follows us around and is basically absorbing all of the events of our lives and formulating a way to appear like us, to
Sure.
and it's kind of a fascinating lore when it comes down to it, to think that there's this spirit that looks like us and acts like us. And the question was, one of them was they have mirror tendencies. Like if you're right-handed, it's left-handed. If you're,
Sure. That's so okay. Yeah. All right. So here's my question. I've had multiple times where people have been like, I saw someone, or were you here? Because I saw someone who looked just like you at this place. Should I would normally be like interested, where I'm like, maybe I should go like see who they're talking about or show me a photo. But should I not do that? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
This is one of the most bizarre things, because I get this every now and then too, which is weird. Because I'm a 6'4" Asian that's like 3 feet wide, to have somebody be like, you look just like so-and-so. I was at a Blockbuster. This is showing my age. I was at a Blockbuster looking for movies, and this group, it was like 3 or 4 people, came up to me, and first they started talking to me very familiarly and calling me Mike. And I'm like, I'm not Mike. They made me show them my driver's license to prove that I wasn't this guy. And then they said, you got to come with us to his house. No. And I was like, no, thank you. Like, no, it'll weird out his parents. You look just like him. I'm like, no, thank you. I'm just going to grab my Evil Dead 2 and leave. It was very bizarre, but they were so adamant. And then for weeks later, I would hear stories of people saying, I saw you over at so-and-so, and I waved, and you didn't even wave back. I was like, I was not there. That was not me.
Oh, man.
So it got to a point where I was like, I got to meet this Mike.
I know.
Because then the worst thing is you do meet somebody who everyone says you look like, and you're like, I don't look like that. Right. You think I look like that? I don't look like that. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
What's a weird concept is I've never been told that I look like someone who is actually female. It's always somebody's like, you look just like my nephew from the age of like 10 years old. Like I remember I had
really weird,
I know, right?
You definitely look female.
But that's weird, isn't it? It's a weird concept, because I'm like, it does, like the concept of doppelgangers almost like follow a binary of sorts.
That's interesting too, because
they be somebody else.
It does make sense that, the classic thing is that there's always something that trips up a doppelganger. There's always something that they don't get right. And we talked about this with the Plat Eye. The Plat Eye is a Gullah folklore creature that is attempting to look human. It's doing its best, but it always fails in some regard. And the most famous regard is it oftentimes only has one eye, hence its name, Plat Eye. But the closest it'll get, and this I always felt bad about this, because this comes up in a lot of folklore, that a hair lip is a mistake from a demon or a trying to replicate humanity. Even like a hair lip was a sign of vampirism. A hair lip was a sign of, and so like the Plat Eye, when it gets the closest it can get is to have just the hair lip. Okay. It's got all the other features just right, and then it doesn't stick the landing on the lip. That is in no way disparaging towards people with hair lips. I'm just saying that is it's just something kind of common folklore, sure. and that's the truth of I know that redheads had a hard time in history.
Lord, yeah, you're not kidding.
Because whenever something's unique or different from the rest of everyone, we start to try to come up with an answer that makes them why is this person like this? Imagine albinos definitely did not have an easy time in history, because they were so significantly different. And there were certain cultures that would see this as a positive, this is a blessed person, this is a person touched by some divinity. Very rarely, though. Mostly we suck. Mostly humans are like beast. So Madison, you were saying that
people say that you look like a young, because it's very interesting to me.
Yeah, this has happened to me multiple times in my life. Like it's always random people that I meet. It's like the first time it ever happened, I was probably like 10 years old or something, and it was a substitute teacher. And she came up to me while I'm doing my work and whatnot, and she's like, I have to tell you something. I'm like, yes. So she's like, you look exactly like my nephew, like uncannily like my nephew. And she pulls out a photo out of her purse and she shows it to me, and it did look somewhat like me, a little bit in like the same facial structure. I had really bright blonde hair, he had really bright blonde hair and stuff. Well,
it's funny.
Your brain needs support, and new Ollie Brainy Chews are a delightful way to take care of your cognitive health. Made with scientifically backed ingredients like Thai ginger, L-theanine, and caffeine, Brainy Chews support healthy brain function and help you find your focus, stay chill, or get energized. Be kind to your mind and get these nootropic chews at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Because I think that when people recognize something in you, sometimes it isn't necessarily the look. I mean, they transcribe it to the look, but it's you remind me of, the sensation of your spiritual energy, how I interact with you, the feeling I get from you. Because that becomes more of what I'm used to, is people are like, oh, you remind me of, a grizzly bear, or mostly it's like, my brother and my father, these ideas of the big guy who gives good hugs, a sensation rather than a look, than actual look. But we will transcribe that sensation to the look. They will force a little bit of the look because they have such a strong rapport with you. They're like, oh, I feel and sense a familiarity in you.
Sure.
And you're just bro. You're just full bro.
I'm very masculine, so but yeah, it's been like that. Like still to this day, every once in a while, I'll get people who come on the trolley and they're like, "You look just like my son," and I'm like, "Okay."
That's like, wait, I just can't believe someone would say that to you.
It apparently it's just so much like that it compels them that they're like, I have to tell her that she looks like my son. And I'm like,
I just don't think you look male at all.
I have very neutral features, so think about it,
Well, when I was little, more horror stories from my sister, Jinhee, who,
oh boy,
older sisters, their point in life is to make younger siblings suffer. When I was young, and I'm going to say I was maybe six or seven, Jinhee used to dress me up in all of her clothes, in a girl's dress and everything, barrette in my hair, and take me out to try to convince people that I was our cousin Christine. Oh. And everyone knew me, and they're all like, "That's Chris." And Jinhee was like, "No, this is Christine." And over time, we were able to fool quite a few people that I was, in fact, the cousin visiting.
Wow.
As Christine.
I love that.
Wow.
Yeah. That's so funny.
But I think that is one of those things that we innately think that there are people who are going to look like us. Mm-hmm. And it helped that there were all these shows that suggested that, cousins could be identical, or, that there are identical people in the world, and that they can interchange or interswitch. And, we grew up with Parent Trap and with, these stories that seem to suggest that there could be this exact duplicate. Because, even when you see two identical twins and they're side by side, you kind of have this notion, I can tell them apart. Yeah. Just by looking at them, there's enough variation. But if I saw them one at a time, it would be much harder.
Sure.
When they're right next to each other, you're like, okay, all right, I've categorized it. But you encounter them one at a time, you're like, uh-oh. No, is that Michael? Is that Richard? Oh, hang on, Richard has a more linear fate. No, Michael has a more linear. No, his hair's this way.
What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say
question.
it's interesting that it's not even just a Western thing, to discuss doppelgangers. It's actually pretty universal because even in Eastern cultures, a lot of people believe in jinn, and they're the same concept as a doppelganger, just with a little bit more.
Well, that's the whole the hag.
Of a spin. Yeah, exactly.
The hag oftentimes will assume the form of someone you love. And can transform or become the vision. And it comes from the fear of being replaced.
Yeah.
That deep sensation that you are replaceable, that your position in the world is not secure, that somebody could come along and just take everything from you. There is a great, Twilight Zone tried to reboot in the 80s. And there's a great episode with Bruce Willis where he was, and it was kind of like a Christmas Carol. He was just a mean, business-oriented, never had time for anybody, cold person. And he started getting thank yous from people, thank you messages. All of a sudden, his mother is like, "Oh, I'm so glad you visited," and things. And he has no idea what's going on. And it turns out that there is somebody looks just like him going around doing these things, and he is slowly getting sicker and sicker.
Oh, wow.
And he's in bed, fading away literally. And the doppelganger shows up and he looks at the doppelganger. He's like, take care of, everyone. And he's like, I will. And then he just disappeared.
Oh, that's good.
And I was like,
that's very,
it's
so,
like the concept of be good, or somebody's going to do it better.
Wow.
Show up and live your life better.
So let's say doppelgangers exist. What is y'all's theory as to where they would come from? Are they something that is demonic? Are they malicious spirits trying to, or like a demon or something like that?
I think they're more resentful because every bit of lore that you kind of see with doppelgangers, even with us, it's they're resentful because they're living a trash existence.
Right.
And then they're seeing you live a normal existence in reality. And they're like, I want that so bad.
Yeah.
It's almost always these stories of how much would you do to get the life you wanted, And so where they come from is tricky. Because I can't wrap my mind around whether or not they're a spawn off of your energy or your spirit, or if they saying when you're born, the moment you enter the world, they're spawned from into existence or whatever, or if, it's more so a concept of they slowly start to become a thing as you continue living on your life. I really can't figure out.
Yeah, there are lots of different theories. Going back to that stupid book, in the very beginning of the book, the preface of the book suggests that all mirrors are like windows. And on the other side of the window is just this vast ocean of darkness, this incredible gulf of unformed things. It's just a chaotic nightmare of all the things that we ever wished didn't exist but do, and they're behind and held at bay through mirrors. Mirrors didn't exist in the forms that we're used to for so long that these things, these primordial, dark, spiritual things, just existed in a dimension of darkness. And then these windows show up, and they can look in and see us going about our lives, and they can see us, so they start to imitate us. And the concept that seemed to suggest was that these spirits, these malevolent spirits, can kind of hook into a single mirror, and they will fight to remain at that one mirror, and they will look through the mirror, and they will choose the person that they're going to try to emulate. And they're going to try to form into the reflection, and they're going to try to... And it was a fascinating story of what's behind the mirror. And of course, it was enough to give me heebie-jeebies for the rest of my life. Mirrors are very contentious to me, and I would see traces of these stories repeated over and over. People will talk about these things, and you'll hear stories that kind of hearken to that one notion that a mirror is a threshold between which a never-ending gulf of darkness and the world of light that we live in exists. So it's fascinating to think that maybe these spirits are just these desperate, starving things that wish they were real, that wish they had existence, which is also a common storyline.
Yeah.
Of fae lore, of just folklore and fairy tales, and that beings just want to be a part of our world. Desperate to be, and quickly enamored by humans. They see a human and they're like, these are wondrous things. How wondrous the humans are, and how much I wish I were like that. And so they start imitating us, and they start looking like us. Even in like the really scary versions of haunted forest lore, a lot of times people will hear voices, sometimes their own voices, calling out to them, calling their names. So now you're dealing with mimicry, this idea of mimicry being a way to draw people, crying like a baby out in the woods, hearing a baby's cry and following it because we are compelled by that. Intriguingly enough, people believe that that's why cats meow. Cats are imitating the baby cry to get the attention, because cats do not meow naturally. They adapted to make that sound, a sound that we would respond to.
Pretty sure the internet would hate that.
Oh, no, I'm sure. I'm sure.
That's actually a pretty well-known concept.
I would not put that on like a scientific stake or anything, but I heard that enough that meowing is in fact a sound that is supposed to trigger our nurturing.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And that makes sense that if an animal witnesses, well, they really care for that thing when it makes that noise. Maybe I should make that noise. Maybe that noise
sounds actually like, science. That actually sounds like evolution, like the spider tail viper. Y'all know about that?
Yes.
All right. Yes. Right?
Absolutely.
Bro, is that not a spider?
It's insane.
Yes.
I tagged you in it.
Yeah, where it's like, come get me.
And then the bird's
and the bird's like zoom and then shomp.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For those of you listening, we just described the actions of the spider tail viper, where the spider tail viper essentially has a tail that looks like a spider, and puts it on a rock, and it's like, come get me, Mr. Bird. And then the bird, being dumb, is like, spider, what birds eat specifically?
Plenty.
What? They can
Tons.
see spiders? Though?
Oh, yeah. What do you mean? What?
Well, you're...
Hawks,
owls.
Yeah, we
flying
talk
high.
about birds' vision a lot.
True.
Because they're very good at, think about moths that have created the camouflage to look like things on their back.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So like something, it's a face on their back. That's a lot of
wild
intuition.
Right.
It's like, so a bug was like, we keep getting eaten. Why do you think that is? Because we don't look scary. Can we look scary? Maybe the next generation.
Aposomatic.
Maybe our kids. It's like, okay. Hey, kids, look scary.
Okay.
And then it just happened over, however many years of, centuries of evolution. Yeah, it's fascinating. To think about. But back to the doppelganger point, the idea of spirits trying to mimic us in order to be brought in from the cold, in order to experience the life that we exist in, because I think in a lot of ways, I don't know that ghosts hang out with each other.
Yeah.
As rare as it is for us to see a ghost, it might be as rare for ghosts to see each other. They don't always know of each other. They don't always, sometimes they do. And usually it's because they're connected. Like if a group of children died, they tend to know each other. But if you have one ghost and then there's another ghost, you don't get a lot of details. They don't really tell you a lot back and forth. And I think it's because maybe every being's on its own frequency, dependent on when it died or how it's existing in a place. And I'm certainly not saying that it's impossible that they see each other. I'm just saying that it might be a very solitary and scary place for spirits. They may think they're the only thing, or they're living in a type of desperation that they see us and they're like, look at this community, look at these people care for each other, look at this life. Because we talk about that a lot. Like ghosts really, really want to be alive again. Or feel alive again. But if you were never alive, that probably would drive you insane.
Right.
The notion, because you don't know what it is, but it must seem
I always
amazing.
gravitate, you guys know this, everyone knows this, everyone listening knows this, I always gravitate to the demonic.
Sure.
Yes.
I always,
It's a demon.
but this, y'all, seems extra demonic because
Yes.
because of the concept of possession, right? It's like a form. There's also, if we're talking about mimicry, in nature, which for some reason I have researched a lot about recently. Actually, I think maybe because the doppelganger stuff is gone.
I think it's just you have an interest in wild things that animals do.
Yeah.
That's true too.
But I think a lot of people know about that parasite that goes into snails.
Oh,
And it
yes.
goes into their antennas, right? And then it's like, hey, I'm a delicious meal, and it's like super bright and very easy for the bird to see. The bird comes down, eats it, and then the cycle continues because it comes out in the bird poop, and there's more of that
how it
parasite.
reproduces.
And it's how and so that is very demonic to me.
Sure.
Like, that's very like, I'm gonna possess something for my own gain and spread, like a cancer. And so I sometimes really think, like, when I think about doppelgangers, I think that 9 times out of 10, for me at least, that it is a demonic entity that is trying to harvest and replicate, and
See, the thing is, I mean, you're very correct in logically thinking that is a darker entity, because the whole concept of like why people lock their mirrors and things like that really is because they're trying to keep evil entities out, not allowing things in through the threshold.
Sure.
So if doppelgangers are the ones who have the grasp of the mirrors and things like that, that would lean on the side of being an evil entity. And then on the flip side of it, with the mimicry and whatnot, every entity that you encounter in the woods, if it, says your name, knows your name in general, talks to you, calls out to you, whistles, things like that, you just automatically know from centuries of ancestors and things like that telling you, like, don't mess with these entities. That leans on the side of,
I would say, what do I always say about nature, Madison? I always say that one of my favorite quotes, and it's just because it sounds evil, it's not, there's no reason for it really, but nature is Satan's church. And I've always thought that is such an interesting thing to say, because nature, to me, and this, is how I know that God exists, because it's just so specific and interesting, and that's what helps me keep the faith and whatnot. And so, I've always thought that nature as Satan's church is a very interesting example, and I think that if that's true, I think that aggressive mimicry, which I believe is what it's called in nature when there's that mimicry to harvest and kill something, I think that aggressive mimicry could be something related to demonic.
Well, I mean, the problem is these are our definitions, the definitions we place on it. When we see nature, because nature is brutal. And nature is it doesn't care about the rules or laws or anything like that. If a puma gets into your house and rips you to shreds, it's doing what pumas do. It is not being evil.
Nope.
But we can define it and say that was an evil animal. That was an evil animal. It's like, was it evil, or was it just doing what the animal does?
That's exactly it.
Right.
And that becomes the fascinating point, is sins exist because humans label them. Demons exist because humans label them. These things exist, or not exist. These things are defined by us. And so it is easy to start to say, well, that which harms us is evil.
right.
But again, it might be its nature. I used to say that there's a lot of demon activity that seems an awful lot like fire. When man first discovered fire, they worshipped it, and they thought it was alive. And why wouldn't they? It moves, you feed it, and it grows. It's just like a living thing. Why wouldn't you think that it's alive?
Yeah.
In your primitive mind, you're like, I've found this new animal, this new thing, but when I touch it, it burns me. If it gets on me, it'll kill me. So we have to be very careful and cautious around it, which is what I always say, do with a demonic force.
Oh.
Because if you touch it, it will burn you. If it gets on you, it will kill you. You have to be mindful, respectful, keep your distance. And there's enough conversation on the table to suggest that if you know how to work with it, you can cook yourself a fine meal. It can warm you. Because that's what a lot of cults do is they are like, I'm worshiping to this entity and it is giving me, powers and things like that because they are learning how to warm themselves by this fire.
Wow.
So it's weird that we have all this language, but the truth of the matter is it's probably best to stay away because we don't understand it entirely. We don't know it entirely.
If we have any listeners that were on like the edge of like, hey, should I join this cult? They're going to be, now after hearing that, they're going to be like, I'm doing it.
Well, it's just a matter of being respectful of nature. We know to go out in the woods, avoid the bears. Do not poke the bear. Don't pick up the cub and run around with it. We know all of these things, and of course, a lot of that's from observation. A lot of them was, that guy got totally eaten.
But what if it needs snuggles?
Don't snuggle the bear.
No.
It is not our place to snuggle a bear.
But it is an interesting point to bring up because Chris and I always, discuss demonic entities, malevolent entities in that catch-all term, simply because that is the only term really that exists for those types of things.
Absolutely.
But truly what it means in what you did a good job describing is that these are entities that threaten us as
capable of harm.
Right. And that's truly why people don't mess with them, because there are plenty of, people who practice witchcraft and things like that who work with demons and things like that. And they have studied specifically the boundaries of what they can do.
How close can you get?
How close can you get? And
what
also,
can you safely take away from it?
Right. Well, and the whole other part of it is the reason why people don't tend to get into, any type of contact or relationships with these types of entities is because they usually want something, or no, I should say always want something in return. And sometimes that's really brutal.
I'm going to bring up a classic movie. Tremors 2.
Yes.
Yes.
Tremors 2 has a
Tremors
line
2.
in it that always sticks out in my head when people talk about demons. Because people talk about demons and manipulation and what they want and what they do, but there's a line in the movie, Tremors 2, which states...
They can fly!
No. You mean to tell me that they're so smart because they're so dumb?
Oh, yeah.
The creatures seemed like they were super smart, that they were always outsmarting them and always doing these things, but they were just acting on a very singular motive, which was food and I can see you, because I can see your heat. And that was it. The reason why we are the ones who put all of the intelligence on a lot of these things.
Right.
We are the ones who give them motivation, but they could just be this rolling force that wants to eat us. And the only thing they want is to eat us. But we're like, oh no, it's malicious and it's got this intense and it's thinking of this and it has ancient knowledge. It just wants to eat you.
Wow.
And that's bad enough.
That's honestly, like pretty good screenwriting, surprisingly.
Yeah.
I'm
impressed.
Absolutely. Every time somebody goes into a lot of because even in the cases of possession where a person is speaking languages that they don't know or things like that, it's like, are you dealing with an entity that knows that, or is that entity opening up the fact that we are interconnected, all human beings? We are all one piece of a giant puzzle, and the universal consciousness concept. And when this thing is inside of us, our ability to reach out through time and through space to other ideologies and other knowledges, that might be the case. We might just be drawing upon it. It's like, they're speaking German and they've never studied German.
Yeah.
Well, you know who studied German? Germans. So, you might be, channeling through to other people, because you hear it every now and then that people will like go into a coma and wake up being able to speak a foreign language, or people go into a coma and suddenly have a skill that they didn't have before. And I think that it's because there's a repository of all thought that could conceivably connect us all. And we, obsessed with individuality, refuse to commune with each other because we're so bound to be the individual.
Sure.
Which is also bringing back the fear of the doppelganger, that we're not individual, that we're not singular. It's possible doppelgangers are there specifically to tell us that we're a part of a whole, and we refuse it. We refute it. We say no. We are not. No one's like us. No one. I'm fiercely independent and fiercely individual, but the doppelganger stands there and says, "No, you're a part of something greater and bigger, and we are all the same."
Yeah.
And it is our fierce determination to say no.
So this is a really fun subject, and I think we're going to do another episode on this, but we're going to do a Q&A with Parajunkies. I'm going to put on Patreon soon, like, hey, submit your doppelganger questions, and then we're going to answer Parajunkie questions. I think that'd be pretty fun to do, like a Parajunkie Q&A with doppelgangers. But yeah, for sure.
And a good point to end off on that logic that Chris just gave us is, you see this in nature as well, that interconnectivity. Look at mushrooms. Have y'all seen how insane mushrooms are?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Because they are one of the oldest species of anything in the world. And they grow everywhere, and they all are interconnected more so than the internet, is what scientists say.
Absolutely.
Because they have this mycelium connection. So they're able to tell what all the other mushrooms around them are experiencing. So if there is, nutrient depletion in an area, they stop growing in that area because the other mushrooms are like, hey, don't grow in this area, things like that. And they're able to communicate all across the world. So why wouldn't that be the same concept for the rest of humanity?
Are you trying to say that there's no individualism with them? Because if so, I agree with you. And maybe that's why it works. There's no me over you. There's no narcissism.
Well, there's equality.
There's insane equality. I think that all of what you're talking about is
like flocks of birds. When you watch a flock of birds fly, hundreds of birds flying will immediately change course, and they don't collide into each other. They move at such an amazing pace and such an amazing, beautiful display of cohesion that it seems as though they are sharing this one thought, this one existence and experience. And it's like maybe they just have such good reflexes, but it doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like one bird's initiating and the rest of them are following. They'll move in a swarming pattern without hitting each other, which is, kind of beautiful to look at.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Yeah. So if you're ever questioning the paranormal, just look at nature, because nature truly parallels a lot of paranormal concepts. Even talking back to the mimicry things that we were discussing, the fact that birds are intelligent enough, birds are intelligent enough to learn to talk. You see like parrots and things like that are able to learn words and say them in ways that I'm like, I can fully understand you. It's kind of that same concept with entities where they're able to watch and learn from us.
Yeah.
And then mimic us to communicate or to attach. And don't forget that, like, cuckoo birds knock the eggs out and leave their eggs there. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in nature where some, parasitic or other will show up and be like, here, take care of this. We'll put this in your life. The fears of foundlings in folklore kind of come from that idea that desperation to be part of us, they will sink in and say, here's a little kid. It's not a monster. Raise it.
What other examples of paranormal in nature are there?
Gosh, so many.
Well, I mean, even look at like the relationship between dogs and humans, where dogs are descendants of wolves, something wild and uncontrolled and whatnot. And they were able to bring dogs to the point where dogs are able to, like, I look at Argyle sometimes, our dog, our Silky Terrier. She is so intelligent to the point where
smart,
has learned to make certain noises, and I know what she's saying and what she's wanting.
Absolutely.
Do that.
And so it's the same kind of concept of like, she's a descendant of a wolf, but she's so intelligent now that she has learned to interact with humans.
And it's annoying.
Oh, it's very
So annoying.
It's very annoying. But so are ghosts sometimes.
Ghosts are very annoying.
And so it's that same concept of like some ghosts, like baby ghosts, not like children ghosts, but like, new ghosts and things like that. Sometimes they try things out to see what works. They might not end up being an entity that relies on knocking things off counters and opening doors and whatnot, but they could be a new entity in the scheme of things. And they're like, how am I going to get this person's attention? Wait, I think I can try doing this and maybe that'll get their attention. And then they watch for the reaction. It's the same way with a lot of animals. They test their boundaries and then they're like, did it work? How'd they react? What's happening?
Well, and almost every scavenger has a paranormal mirror, because when you think of those birds that sit on like big animals, and they're just waiting to eat what the big animal gets, feeder fish.
With the sharks.
With the sharks.
Yeah.
When you think about those entities, those creatures, they're very similar to a paranormal experience, because what's happening in a paranormal experience is oftentimes they're gathering around the wealth of nourishment from our lives, and they're feeding off of the pieces that come off, and they can become pretty bold. A hyena is a scavenger animal, not really a hunter, but when given the opportunity, it'll take something down.
Right.
They're scary animals, but for the most part, they're just waiting for their leftovers. They're just waiting for what's what the lion didn't eat. But that makes them no less fierce and no less dangerous. It just means that they've adapted to live off of the life of another, which is very much how a lot of paranormal encounters happen. They see that we have plenty, and that plenty is life force, is life energy, is the things that nourish us spiritually, and they gather around, and they're hoping to get pieces of it. And if they get enough pieces, they'll start to beg at the table. And if they get enough, they can become aggressive. Absolutely.
Well, and that's the same idea of like why you can set boundaries with entities
absolutely.
usually.
No, sit.
Yeah.
Stay.
Right. It's like, it's the same idea as like a dog. You have to tell them your boundaries, or they're not going to know. They're like, I didn't realize that bothered you, me opening this door or whatever. But once you tell them, a lot of times they're like, okay, won't open the door anymore. Negative reaction. Maybe I shouldn't be opening doors. Let me try something else. So imagine your house ghost as a puppy, basically. You got to teach them its boundaries. But on that note, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. And maybe we'll do a whole episode on ghosts parallels with nature. That might, if you're interested in listening to something like that. But hopefully we answered most of your questions about ghosts, or not ghosts, doppelgangers at least. And if you have any more questions, maybe send it over to our Q&A button. We are going to start doing Q&As again. So if you have questions, send them on over to the Q&A button on TikTok. Also, again, if you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, or give us a rating over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you don't already follow us, you can follow us on all the platforms under Haunted City Podcasts. But with that, my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.